102.7 WMJ FM Bermuda. Magic 102.7. The opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of the ownership, management, or staff of Magic 102.7 or Inter-Island Communications.
It's time now for the Need to Lead motivational program with Llewellyn Thompson.
Good morning, Bermuda. This is good morning, Bermuda. This is Dr. Lou on the Need to Lead in for Dr. Llewellyn Thompson. It is a beautiful Saturday morning here, and as we do in the spirit of the Need to Lead, always beginning with prayer and devotion, we choose what's better for your soul. May God divinely motivate you to do what's best for your soul. If it's spring cleaning, may you clean with a new song in your heart. If it's reading a book, may you find one that rocks your world. If it's sharing what you've learned, may you speak with God's passion and power. And if it's giving, may you give generously and joyfully, believing God will resupply and then some. Your journey is unique to you. Listen for his voice and do what he says. God's best is your best. Ashe, ashe. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as we begin and kick off this Heritage Month, when I tell you this morning's guest, let me just first see, because we're doing it long distance, let me first test the mic, people. Let's see. Good morning, Mr. Lowdru Robinson. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Dr. Lou. A pleasure
Hold
to
on.
see you this morning.
Usually, and this is the issues that we have with technology. Let's see. Let's do that again. Let's try that again. We're all plugged in. All right. Just say something for me, sir.
Good morning, Dr. Lou.
All right. I'm going to do it another way. We're having... Okay, I see what the problem is. Here we go. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Dr. Lou. A pleasure to see you again.
It's always a pleasure. I'm going to plug you in another way and put you through. Let's see. Can you speak for us again? Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Dr. Lou. What a beautiful...
All right, I see what's happening here. But hey, we hear you. You're going over the mic. I was trying to interconnect you through another device. But, you know, that's the way that technology goes. But let me just begin and open up with our listening audience, people. You know this gentleman, Bermuda, Mr. Lowdru Robinson, a shaper of Bermuda Day. And when I say, you know, on this Heritage Month, what better person to have an interview with? I'm just going to say and begin, sir. First of all, how are you?
I am fine. I'm in Waterloo, as you probably know. Canada, my second home, of course. And it's actually very exciting to be talking to you in Heritage Month with Bermuda Day to come in a few weeks' time.
You know, when I think of it, Mr. Robinson, I said right away, I just have to go right there to you, Bermuda Day, and here it is, you are. I consider you a grandmaster of Bermuda Day. Some will say head of Bermuda Day. When you reflect, let me ask you this here, have you ever been chaperone of Bermuda Day? I think is that the title that they use on the lead car?
Actually, when we had Bermuda Day during the time that I worked for the Department of Community Affairs, we didn't have lead cars in the parade. The parade was always started with the Bermuda Regiment.
Mm.
So the cars with the people in recognition of their contribution to Bermuda started many years after I had left the department.
So you've never headed the parade.
I have been behind the scenes in the parade all the time, but
And I was curious about this, sir, because I said, given your history and given one of the shapers and creators of Bermuda Day, man, it will be. I'm surprised that Cultural Affairs have not called you, or the Minister of Tourism, they haven't called you to lead out on our Bermuda Day, especially recognizing you as one of our esteemed seniors, elders, and you are indeed an elder of this important event to Bermuda. Let me just ask you reflectively, when you look at where Bermuda Day was since its inception, through your creation and those of others whom you partnered with, to where we are now, how much has the event transformed to capture the cultural identity of Bermudian people?
what a difficult question, but
Hmm.
comprehensive question. But let me just say that at the beginning, I dreamed of what Bermuda Day would become. And in the last two times that I've seen either pictures or been at Bermuda Day, my dream has become a reality. The culture of Bermuda is on full display in Bermuda Day, including people born in Bermuda and people who've come to Bermuda to work, all participating in one event showing our common humanity and the unity of one culture.
I guess that's the most significant thing that when you say our common humanity, uh, uh, and I'll get into the oneness of humanity. This is an article that you wrote that also is really symbolic of Bermuda Day. But this common humanity that you characterize as part of Bermuda Day, when and I'm gonna place it like this here. You know, some of the symbolic things that I um, associate with that. For example, when you traverse the sidewalks, the streets of Bermuda during Bermuda Day, and they've already begun, where families are identifying their plots along the streets. And every year, I mean, if there's anything that fascinates me probably more about Bermuda Day is walking the streets of Hamilton and just reading the names. And I'm always curious in terms of the interrelation of names on the street, you know? And I wanted to get a sense of your lived experience your lived experience, 90 years that you are reflecting on that aspect of our humanity, of the interrelation of the family names across Bermuda Day. And how much do you believe that this event that we call Bermuda Day uh, is a strong cultural signifier? You say it's our humanity, you know, but how much of a strong cultural signifier is it leaving the local shores, and you're in Canada, yeah, many Bermudian families in Canada. From your observation, your experience, how much do you see Bermudians abroad still identifying with Bermuda Day at home?
Well, first of all, you have to acknowledge that Bermuda Day comes from Canada. I lived in Canada, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
I used to participate in Canada Day.
Mm-hmm.
Canada Day is the day that people forget what European country or African country or Asian country they come from and celebrate as one. So that was the concept behind having Bermuda Day. And as far as having the names that you're talking about, one of the things that I used to do every year when I was involved in Bermuda Day was exactly the same thing you did. I walked the streets and noticed not only the names, but the people. The names, of course, whether a person had black skin or white skin or yellow skin, sometimes are exactly the same. So even though there may sort of be racial ideas in terms of people being either black or white, the names give them a common humanity already.
Mhm.
In the last several years, looking at the point that you just mentioned where people identify their spots, that's a recognition that over the past 40 years, those people have been using the same spots over and over. The
Yeah.
only time Bermuda Day didn't happen was during COVID. So that's more than 40 years of actually coming together as one people to celebrate one event. So that, in that sense, that's developing a common humanity of being together as one people.
And you've written and spoken to, this is one event also that is integrated with what historically we refer to as May 24th, the half marathon race.
Mhm.
And so when you reflect and you think of that in terms of how much this sport, I mean, and it's more than just a sport. When I look at the half day marathon, I mean the half marathon, May 24th, it's more than just a sporting event as it morphs into the Bermuda Day festivities and parade. How much do you categorize when you're talking about, I think it's in that race actually, where you see more so less of the divide of Bermuda, more of the unification of Bermuda. And as it morphs into maybe the parade, you get not as, I think more of the Black population embraces the parade, although there is some international representation in the Bermuda Day parade. But I'm just curious in terms of out of your conceptualization of the history of this event, how much did you envision that it would bring that type of unification using the race and then the parade and of course, the meaning of that parade, the floats?
You've actually hit on a key point. The idea of Bermuda Day and with the parade and the marathon comes straight from the Pitt Report. You recall the Pitt Report is what was put together following the so-called 1977 disturbances. In the Pitt Report, there is a direct recommendation to the government of Bermuda. They recognized that the most integrated event in Bermuda was the marathon in the morning of the May 24th, where people participate not because of race, but because of their common interest in the sport of running. And their recommendation was we should expand on that particular event and use that as a focal point of bringing people together to recognize common interests is far greater and more important than what we call race. So on that,
Go ahead.
on reading that in the Pitt report, I put together the race in the morning, which incidentally uh, was helped by Richard Tucker and the person that used to run the race. I'm trying to remember his name. For the moment, I can't remember
Hmm.
it. But Richard Tucker and his relative ran the race. But I got together with them and they agreed to have the race as a part of an all-day celebration.
Mhm.
And the actual parade itself was sort of a repetition of what used to happen before. There used to be an Easter parade when I was a child. So I used that same concept to have something to follow on in the afternoon. So the two events together made up the Bermuda Day.
Interestingly, when I think in terms of the race and then going into the parade, you talk about the Easter parade. Certainly, I have memory of that. But the race itself has, would you say that the race has, when I look at the race, I think of the folklore of the race. Sir
Mhm.
Stanley.
Yes, I can
Uh,
remember him running as well.
yeah. An iconic figure of that race, right? And credit to many of the organizers, they do look to uphold and acknowledge that yearly. But I think of Sir Stanley, I think of many of the other, Ray Swan, many of the other iconic figures, Cal Bean, Bermudians who helped to manifest and shape an identity of that race in terms of the significance of not just the participants, but how those participants in a Sir Stanley, a Cal Bean, a Ray Swan, and even Mike Watson, uh, these folk help as Bermudians help to really signify the Bermudian essence of the race. The race, some will say today, has become more international. Yes, and it embodies much of what you say in terms of our humanity, because there are many, many nationalities that are here in Bermuda now whom we invite into this race.
Mhm.
Do you feel that we have lost some of the folklore of that race to bring about the unification of humanity as you describe?
We wouldn't lose the folklore if we keep telling the story every
Uh-huh.
time the event comes up. That's a good time to review some of the history. But Bermuda has developed from a small island to an international place. You look at the history of Bermuda and you see that basically it was an agricultural place to start with. Today, it plays a major role in international finance. So we are a part of the world, and the world itself is one country. You know, planet Earth does not have any borders on it. Planet Earth does not have countries. Politically, we have decided countries based on the people who live there. But if you look at a map, you will see all the borders. But when the astronauts go out in space and look down on our Earth, there are no borders. The Earth is one country, and humans are its citizens. And those humans are all one, especially today, because if you look at people who are alive today, everybody alive today has a common ancestor in Africa. The
Mm.
humans of today may be different colors, but they trace their ancestry back. It all goes back to Africa. So we are one people living on one planet, and we need to be working together in unity if we're ever going to survive as a civilization in the whole world.
As you reflect upon that, Mr. Robinson, is that something that we should be giving? When I look at well, we can talk about Bermuda Day, we can talk about that race, and I'm glad that you described it as such in terms of origin, because you're basically implying that the origin of humanity comes out of Africa, and Bermuda's transformation from agriculture to where we are in international business has that element in it, that complexity in it. And so, is this something that we should be in many of our events, whether it's in Bermuda or elsewhere? And I'm sure, uh, in Canada, there's evidence of it with Canada Day. Uh, is this something that should be written into the creed, the principles that we're always giving acknowledgement to what we have created, in this case, the Heritage Day, to the origin?
Yes, I agree with you there. In fact, I cannot remember the exact quote, but the United Nations has a quote basically saying that all people are one and all people need to work together to make our planet and our lives successful.
Mhm.
So it all goes back to our origins. Now, over time, of course, things have developed, and one group of people may get a little further ahead technology-wise to another, but we are all interconnected. We need everybody to make the earth a successful place for all humans.
When you earlier you mentioned in terms of our storytelling, and I would be remiss. You are a storyteller. You are an author. You are a writer, and credit to you on your recent visit to home. Yes, around April, what was it, 14th? I know that you left some of your work at the National Library, the archives, and Bermuda College. And I'd just like for you to reflect on that because I really want to go into, yes, affable Curmudgeon. Uh, you're hardly a grumpy old man to me.
But I'm a grumpy.
Curmudgeon, that's what it implies. But
I'm
affable, you are a friendly grumpy old man. Yeah. At
that
the
that
same time, go ahead. Sorry.
I am a friendly old man, but I'm dealing with a grumpy, stubborn problem,
Uh,
race.
yeah.
That's where the irony of the name comes together. Race is something that does not exist. There are
Mm,
no black people. Well, go back to ancient history. Nobody was black, nobody was white. The only way you identified people in ancient history is from the country they were born in, the Gauls, the Romans, the Greeks, or religion, Zoroastrian, Buddhist, Christian, and so on. So people were only identified by where they lived, where they, and how they worship. There is no mention of history in history of white people until 1681.
hmm
1681. Before that time, there were no white people in the world. There were no black people. They were humans. They were Africans. They were French, and so on. And it only started in 1681 because of something that happened between Africans and uh, their owners. At this point, there's slavery going on in North America. And there are problems between indentured servants and slaves. What is almost never written in history school books is that indentured servants and slaves lived together, did the same work, ate together, slept together, had children together. They were all pretty much the same. And it wasn't until the indentured servants and the Africans, of course, the major difference between the two, Africans were enslaved for life. Indentured servants had contracts. Usually
hmm
it was about 6 years or so. So what happened was the indentured servants and the so-called slaves started rebelling. And when they started rebelling, they actually ended up attacking and literally killing the owners of the uh, plantations that they lived on. And one particular rebellion, referred to as Bacon's Rebellion, was the worst one of all. And at that point, the slave owners consulted with the people back in Britain who financed the colonies and said, we got to do something about this. And what they decided to do was to identify the indentured servants and make them aware that they were similar to their owners. How did they do that? By choosing the color white. The
Mm.
first time white people are mentioned in any document in history is in 1681, when the indentured servants suddenly became white like their masters. And once they had that established, they started to develop laws and rules that gave indentured servants a better lifestyle similar to their masters.
With that explanation, Mr. Robinson, do you feel that, and I hear in it, but I want to get your perspective on it, just pushing this envelope a little bit more. Do you hear in your explanation, I hear it, but I want to get more of your perspective, an argument, legal platform for reparations in that argument?
Well, definitely, because when you think about it, we all know where slavery ended in 1834.
Mm-hmm.
But when slavery only ended by the British, when they were able to convince the British owners of these plantations that they had to give it up and make the people they worked for them free. But the owners were not prepared to give it up without being compensated for their loss of property.
Mm-hmm.
What did the British do? They borrowed 20 million pounds in today's money to pay off the owners of slaves, according to the numbers that they had. And that was the way they were able to um, change the system in the country. Ironically, there's actually one story in one of the books that I've written. One of the slave owners was actually an African. He lived in Wales, right across the Bristol Channel from where I lived when I was living in Britain.
Mm-hmm.
So not only did all of the white slave owners get compensated, the one African that I'm aware of also was compensated. But in compensating the owners, the actual enslaved people never got anything. So reparation was paid to slave owners, but not to people who had been enslaved for hundreds of years. So, so that's why I think today there's a big call for compensation from people living in the West Indies islands in particular for the problems that went on during that period.
I'm glad you brought that up. I was, yeah, of course, the king is in Bermuda. The king is in Bermuda. King
Mhm.
Charles is in Bermuda. And yesterday I had the experience of being interviewed by members of Sky News. And they asked the question about the sentiments or even arguments around reparations. Of course, we know in the UK, I can't say they have fallen short. They have refused to apologize. And it is my understanding that part of the refusal to apologize, they certainly acknowledge the atrocities of the transatlantic slave trade. They acknowledge that, but no apology. And it's my understanding, framing it within some of what you said, is a legal implication behind why they have not apologized, because once they do, it opens up the legal framework to approach compensation in the context of some of the things that you just shared. We now move that argument into the legal, whether it's United Nations, that unification that you speak to. And so I'm just curious in terms of as we talk about our oneness of humanity, as we talk about the removal of borders, when we talk about what the world looks like from out of space to what the realities are on Earth, how do we begin to, like you said, erase those boundaries, those borders, if those who have shaped those borders aren't prepared to apologize and set the legal framework to atone?
It's not an easy problem. It certainly was easy to compensate people when slavery ended. They knew who all the slave owners were. Incidentally, most of them were parliamentarians who were in the parliament. In fact, the richest person in Britain as a result of slavery, his son was the prime minister for 4 consecutive terms
Mm,
in the UK Parliament. But it was easy to identify it because they had records of people and they owned plantations. They knew who they had to pay. The difficulty today is who do you pay the compensation to? Because there's no record of who the people were other than being able to identify the countries that they came from. But even though you cannot pay to the people, you could provide compensation or reparation, as it's called, to the countries that they came from. It's only logical that the people who did the work for 400 years or so from various countries should be compensated just like the owners were for what they call the loss of their property. It's a difficult thing to do, but humans are very clever people. They should be able to figure out some way of how to
mhm.
solve that.
I want to capture, man, time is moving quickly too. Gee. Um, your writings, and I want to bring some of them into the conversation.
Good.
Colonization in Canada. That's one of your writings, articles, and it's interesting reading it. And then, of course, as I frequently do, juxtapose it to the realities of a Bermuda, colonization of and in Bermuda. And so when you reflect on the article that you wrote, Colonization in Canada, and as someone who is living in Canada, knowing the colonization of Canada, and matter of fact, there's even in our current geopolitics, as much as the Canadian government has been oppositional, or let me say, in defense of their position to the lunacy that we see coming to the neighbors of the presidency. Let me just put it there. It's not all Americans, but it's certainly the president. And so when who claims Canada as a colony or another state of United States of America, these aren't things to be just flippantly dismissing. It plays into your argument in terms of removing borders. And how do we begin to do that when our current reality is a slap in the face of the so-called unification that you speak to? How is it that you juxtapose? How can you look at the colonization in Canada and juxtapose it with the colonization of and in Bermuda?
Colonization in Canada basically is controlling the lives of indigenous Canadians, native Canadians. Colonization in Bermuda was African people who were uh, put into subversions in terms of working as enslaved people. Is slightly different in the sense that the origin of the people is different, but the actual impact is exactly the same. You've taken away the freedom of the people in Canada who originally lived in the country. And in the case of Bermuda, you've imported people and lowered their status to almost non-human and forced them to work for you so that you could earn money. So there's a common sort of feeling of pain in both groups of people. The indigenous people in Canada have the same kind of feelings and impact and results as in Bermuda. And as you probably know, very recently, Bermudans have come to realize that indigenous people from North America actually came to Bermuda and were enslaved in Bermuda.
Yeah.
Brinky Tucker has done a great deal of work on that. So, in
Mhm.
that sense, both groups have a common feeling of pain and have experienced the hardness and difficulties of being enslaved. So, there is a link between those two groups of people. Now, the people who enslaved them and forced them in those positions need to recognize that it's a historical fact, and they need to start thinking in terms of some form of compensation of reparation that have harmed their descendants of all of those indigenous people.
I'm glad you put it like that because also in the conversation I had yesterday with members of Sky News that support something that you just said, I shared with them the 10-point reparation plan coming out of the whole CARICOM Reparatory Justice Committee. And in that plan, you can find in that 10-point plan something that's relatable to whether it's colonization in Canada, the current circumstances of Canada, Bermuda, so forth. You just alluded to something in terms of the indigenous aspect of it. And one of the 10-point plans is addressing the indigenous development.
Mhm.
Now, I know I believe that Canada itself has been wrestling with the indigenous development of its people and giving acknowledgement. And as you still pointed out with Brinky Tucker in terms of St. David's and the Native American indigenous people who like are recorded of being brought to Bermuda, there are those connections. And I think these are the type of things from a legal perspective as it is etched in the archives and history, which always fascinates me, Mr. Robinson, that these things are documented. It's evident. You've written about it. You've talked about your atrocities, recorded them. So as complex as it is, and I don't think of the reparations solely from a monetary perspective of compensation. I think that's what brings weight to the reparations principles outlined by the CARICOM Reparations Committee. And first, you begin with the full apology.
The apology is absolutely essential. That is the first step.
Yeah.
Reparations doesn't always have to be cash. It could be other links of culture that could be used, or other opportunities. For just picking an example, providing educational opportunities for people of countries that have had enslaved people in them to universities in some of the more advanced countries. There are many ways that humans could figure out how to compensate and how to help people who are so-called at a disadvantage as a result of slavery. So it needs to be worked out, but it must start with an apology because
Yeah.
the apology recognizes the oneness of humanity. And the apology recognizes that what was done was not only immoral, it actually wrecked and made it difficult for people to develop on their own. So you start by getting forgiveness first, then you have a more common kind of relationship that you can develop because it puts each of you on the same equal plane.
In one of the articles that you wrote, this is the one, the oneness of humanity, and I had to read this. You say culture is the engine that drives community development, leading to a country's national identity. and sometimes it also drives social changes. When you reflect upon that statement that you wrote, culture is the engine that drives community development, leading to a country's national identity, and sometimes it also drives social changes. This concept of national identity, Mr. Robinson, is something that here in Bermuda, I think we still wrestle with. Unlike what you have as a lived experience in Canada, the Canadian national identity is wrapped in its independence, quote unquote, from Britain, upholding its national identity. We have Bermuda Day, we have Cup Match, we uphold the colonial moniker, the colonizer and colonized identity. What is it we need now to move toward that strong national identity that comes with sovereignty?
You ask difficult questions, but
I do.
but fascinating.
But your writing is the provocateur of these questions.
National identity comes out of culture. And culture sometimes, in countries where, let's say, people have lived for centuries without any kind of displacement, it's easier to track the national identity. But when you live in a country that has been invaded several times or colonized, you have to recognize that both what your original culture was and the addition of other people coming in changes the culture. So
Mm-hmm.
culture changes over time, depending on who the people are. And the changes could lead to development and basically more social interaction. But when you add discrimination and racism to that, that controls the development and it's not natural. But when you allow the things to flow in a natural way, you could end up with a culture that is different from what the country started out with. Because nothing stays still. You know, we are
Mm-hmm.
alive. Everything is alive. Everything changes. But when you have changes that flow and the changes are controlled by one group trying to uh, identify themselves as the leaders of whatever change is and controlling the change, you have all kinds of problems. But natural changes leads to natural development and natural identity.
Natural change leads to national development and national identity.
But you think of Bermuda today, it is totally different from Bermuda in 1616 and 1619.
Yes.
And that's because of the impact of the two groups of people who were here. It's still changing. You know, there was a time when, let's think in terms of politics. I can recall when there were only 9 so-called Black people in the House of Parliament. Look at the House of Parliament today.
Mm-hmm.
Time changes things. We don't, and we should not forget our history and recognize what has happened, but we also must move and accept the progress that's being made and expect that things are going to change. Bermuda is not what it was like in the 40s and in the 30s and the 20s. It's much more international today than it was at the past.
As Bermuda is much more international today than it was in the past, also wrapped and captured in our Heritage Month. I mean, today, for example, there's the end-to-end walk. And, that is another May Heritage event symbolic of the oneness of Bermuda, because you will see the full composition, complexity, and complexions, businesses, institutions represented this in this end-to-end walk that is Bermuda. You will find and observe relays. It's all symbolic to me. Relays of Bermudians, non-Bermudians in the same relay race, passing on to each other. All symbolic, all symbolic. Taking this symbolism that you refer to, and this oneness of our humanity of a changing Bermuda. Difficult question again, Mr. Robinson. All right, because you spoke to there's only one race, the human race. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But we keep in our humaneness contest these divides, these divisions. And economics plays a big role in this also, of what Bermuda was in the 1600s to where and what Bermuda is today. Center to it is who controls those economics. With the imbalance of this, what is it again? And I keep moving toward this here. Our responsibility to shaping a Bermudian national identity to be proud of has to challenge this one thing that divides us, because after today's event, we go right back to the behaviors that create the divisions. After Bermuda Day, we go right back to the behaviors that create the divisions. We don't build upon the feel-good moments of a Bermuda Day of unification. How do you, as someone who was of community affairs and shaping it as a director, how do we begin to set even policies that move us toward this national identity construct that can be the Bermuda that we want it to be?
We have to start with education.
Mm.
Is what we teach our children. I lived in Bermuda. I never heard the word slavery ever. I grew up thinking that only West Indians, and my grandfather was West Indian, had ever lived in a country where there was slavery. We need to start to teach children the idea and concept that there is no race, there are humans, and that humans do not always treat each other the same, but we are all one people. We need to reflect on the history and the development that has happened in the past so that we know where we are today. For example, only recently, through Cheryl Packwood's research,
Mm-hmm.
do realize that Bermuda was the first country to have laws that really was the most discriminatory laws ever, the first laws controlling so-called slave people back in 1619, somewhere around that point. And the whole world's concept of controlling people based on their color starts with the laws that started in Bermuda. We
So
need to,
Bermuda has the blueprint.
it exactly did.
Bermuda was the
It was
blueprint
the blueprint.
and still is then.
Well, at one time, people thought Barbados, the Black Barbados Code was the blueprint. But the research that was recently done by Ms. Packwood shows that Bermuda was the place that started this. We need to teach the history of the real things that happen in the world so
Right.
that we have a common understanding of how we started out and how we got to where we are today. And by teaching the history, it's not a question of accusing one person of being guilty or negative or bad or whatever. The history is the reality of what happened. This is what happened. Here is where we are. What are we going to do about it? But if you don't
Well,
know your history, there's no way you can know who you are and where you need to go.
right.
So
And that education is number six actually of the whole CARICOM principles reparations plan. It's about the education, and you're absolutely correct. We have an obligation, yes, here in Bermuda, to re-educate.
that's a good word. We need to re-educate.
We have to re-educate.
It's
I mean,
certainly
I know
part of,
we're engaging in some transformation of education talk right now, but it will warrant with what you just shared. I can imagine if we were to redesign, redevelop the historical narrative, even using some of your writings as part of the literary work to teach our children, not just in terms of reading, but in critical thinking. Because your writings, your articles, really capture that and place Bermuda front and center of what our role is, but it is also something that, as you pointed out, we ourselves probably misrepresent the value and the importance. Uh, if I may add, in our conversation, your blogs, understandably, it was my understanding that your blogs were blasted all across social media, the internet and everywhere, unbeknown to readers that Lowdru Robinson people is alive and well. Is it correct that they had written you off? Here it is, your works were being blasted around the world, and the man who had written it, they had identified this man as deceased. I'm saying this man is alive and well, people, 90 years strong, all his faculties, still contributing. And I want you to share and just give your perspective of coming into that experience and knowledge when you found that out.
it's always a shock when you discover that you've been written out of being alive.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's also humorous. But I don't take things personal. Whatever I've written, whatever I've contributed, it's just based on the facts and the research to actually not only find the facts, but to use them so that other people have become aware of them. Everything that I've written is already known by many people in the world, but it's not shared because there's an advantage of having the concept that one group is better than another. They get
Yeah.
all the privileges. They get to be in the head of everything. They get to be the leaders, and they get to have their choices and dreams fulfilled. So whatever I've done, if it doesn't come back to recognition to me, is not an issue for me. It stands as a testament to the truth of what the world has experienced. And in time, things will change, and people will always be able to not only refer to what I've written, but what others have written along the same lines. And hopefully, at some point, things will begin to change for the better.
Well, it already has, and I know in the background you're very proud that family is listening, and grandson Tyler is there, and I haven't met your other grandson, the filmmaker, correct?
Yes, yes.
And based on our conversation, we had shared, me and I had shared with you, we have an obligation. All that you have shared in this brief period, and I mean when I say not just today, I'm talking about when you came back home a few weeks ago. Um, all that you have shared reflects how much we write ourselves, and I'm saying in Bermuda, we write ourselves out of their history. It's almost when I think in terms of what occurred in terms of the rest of the world writing out. No, Lowdru Robinson is alive and well, people. These writings are now writings. We have a responsibility to uphold and to document and to do the documentaries. I mean, it will be beautiful to do the documentary on a Lowdru Robinson, on a Paulo Camargo, on a Dr. Eva Hudson. We go down the line of luminaries of ours.
You're
We keep missing this. And so as someone who was in as director of community affairs and the culture affairs, credit to them, they are doing some of these things. I just feel that we're not doing enough. And credit to I do believe that the Clyde Best documentary has triggered some things in our people to have and to see and to do more of this. Many of our young people, and this is where I'm going with this here, because it's framed in the legacy of your lineage with your grandsons who uphold this and are passionate about even your stories. We have the obligation now to tell more of those stories wherever we are, whether we're in Canada, UK, Caribbean, in Bermuda, putting out this oneness of our humanity as Bermudian people.
You're absolutely correct. And we need to teach it to our children. Some of our adults are beyond repair, so to speak.
Well,
they're never going to change.
That's a psychological thing, and you're absolutely correct. There's some
Stop.
psychological rehabilitation, but I'm like you. You're 90 years old. You are an elder whom I respect. There are some people beyond repair. I'm a realist. We're not saving everyone.
Yes.
And not everyone wants to be saved.
That's absolutely true. But we must give our children an opportunity to know the facts of history, to understand what has happened. And I'm bound to think that they are not going to be like we were and are and still remain. They're going to be different if they know the whole story. History that has been taught to children, a lot of the truth has been left out.
Yeah.
Need to put it back in so that they get the whole story of history and they recognize the value of themselves and others. And in fact, they recognize there is no other. It is a we. We are together. Nobody's other. We are together. We are one people on one planet, and we have one life. We can make the planet bloom, or ironically, we have the potential to destroy it totally if we keep having these crazy wars and threatening nuclear weapons and all the rest of it, which would impact everybody. Give a different story to our children that includes the truth, and the world will change.
I say this with the event that you helped to shape, Mr. Robinson, that it is a cultural platform to do exactly that. I don't believe that we capture enough of that reflectively. And this is the education to support what you're talking about. And this is something that's been said. If we are to be serious about what you just spoke to, because it places emphasis on the responsibility of the adults to assure and ensure that our children are taught well, right? The history is taught well to them, but they are of it and in it. And what I mean by that is when we look at the Bermuda Day Parade, this is something that you helped to shape. That parade should be telling the story. What is the story that parade is saying and telling about Bermuda's people? Every school. Now, when you first started that event, and even before the Bermuda Day parade, schools were required to do floats. I'm sure you remember that.
I do.
They were required. And so probably I'm saying my generation, we grew up in that, especially having to pick Easter lilies and you're creating a float, whether you wanted to do so or not, you were a part of that creation. And so to capture what you are speaking to, we have to uphold and continue that legacy and that experience. Very important. That is very important that we uphold that. Mr. Robinson, if you can, could you just give us uh, your summation of what you would like to see more of occurring in Bermuda? We've heard about the oneness of humanity, but as you reflect in terms of, and we know about the importance of education, what challenge would you put to Bermuda's people right now?
The question you're asking is what is the challenge I would put to Bermuda?
Yeah.
Yes, my challenge would be to start with education. My challenge is for Bermuda to look at the history that is being taught to the children of Bermuda and begin to add the whole story to Bermuda's history in terms of its people and its development in order to give people a whole picture of who we are,
Hmm.
have lived in the past, where do we want to go in the future. But we must understand where we have come from in order
Hmm.
to understand where we are today. And then we can begin to plan where do we want to go in the future. Do we want to continue with the problems of the past, or do we want to create a future where all of us benefit from being Bermudians and being able to live together in harmony? But you can't do that until you understand everything about what has made you come to the present. The past leads to the present leads to the future. So if we want a harmonious future, we must work on having a harmonious present where every Bermudian has value and importance. There's no such thing as one group being supreme over the other. We are all together in this one small island, and we need each other to make a better world for our children in the future.
Well, my respected Alvin, the last word is your word, and that is certainly something for us to reflect upon as we enter into this second day of Heritage Month, Bermuda Day, Bermuda Month, I call it. Sir, it's been a pleasure. It's not the last time, we know. I look forward to having some extended conversations with you, coming soon to a place near Canada or in Bermuda. I'm wishing you well. I know our colleague, Nikisha Hold, will be in touch with you
Yes.
to really begin to lay some of the foundation of that challenge that you spoke to. We really have that obligation and responsibility to build upon that challenge.
And
Go
let
ahead.
me, if possible, my final word is, first of all, to thank you for making this opportunity available and to let you know that tomorrow, May 3rd, is my birthday. So
Well,
thank you
happy
for
birthday, sir.
giving me a happy celebration at reaching the age of 90 and having the understanding that some of the things I've shared and the things that you are working on is aimed to making Bermuda a better place for all people to live in harmony and work together. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Well, thank you, and thank you to Tyler and everyone else and family there. We look forward to continuing this here and building upon it, sir. And as we say here in Bermuda, while you are in Canada, have yourself a Bermuda day and a happy birthday in advance.
Thank you.
Be well. Take
Bye.
care. All right.